Christine here from Unique Sapphire. So glad to see that you're here. So I did have a comment about asking when I added my acid to my dyes. And today I want to go a little bit more into detail with that and when and how, because there's multiple methods. There's no right or wrong way to do it, but I think I'm going to need some coffee first. Guys, as always, when you go to dye something, it has to be soaked. So we had a really good question about adding your Mortant or your acid to your acid dyes, but I want to make it known that in order for dyeing cotton to make it more permanent, you use soda ash as the Mortant to make it more permanent. And when dyeing wool, you use good old vinegar as the acid, or the Mortant in this case. So there's two different ways that we can look at this. We can actually add, which I didn't even open this yet, the Mortant right into, if we're gonna dye bath something, right into our dye pot. Okay, so you would add that and then add your dyes, get it warmed up, wring out your wet pieces, and go to town on that. So let's start doing that. All right, as always, you want enough water so that your skeins will float. So let's take this over to the stove here. All right, as you can see, I got it on the stove. It's starting to steam up, so that means it's getting warm. I've got my skeins here that I'm going to actually dye bath. Again, my acid is already in my water. I'm going to add my dye. If it'll come out. And a lot of things to think of is to watch your dye and make sure it's all dissolved. I accidentally got this dye wet somehow, and now I have to chip away at it. So some of them come off in chunks, some of it comes off in your hands. And here's another good tip, to use good old paper towel to see how much dye and if it's changing the color. So we're going to need some more. Now this is a potent dye, and I only use a little at a time because it can get pretty potent. still see a few more floaters down there, and gotta wait for them to dissolve. Because if not, you might get a really hard speck. And if you're looking for an all-over color, you don't want one bright speck because that wool is gonna absorb it really quickly. Another thing to note with acid dyes is do not use a pot that you're going to cook in. It has to have its own pot. You don't want to get sick. So in my case, I'm going to be doing 2. And as always, if you're doing anything, make sure everything's loose. If not, you're going to have lighter spots where the skeins are tied. And they're going in. And the reason why you soak your wool before is so that it'll equally absorb the dyes. So if you can't tell already, I'm still doing a Tiffany blue. I don't know, it's one of my favorite things to do. So now I'm going to let this simmer and set the dye in, or it's going to be a robin's egg blue. You'll see it on the next video what we're going to do with this, because again, going on hand painting a yarn. So say if you start with a colored base, you would need to know colors that will play with it nicely in order to hand paint on top of it, and it also adds more depth and more unique colors because you're making your own. So that's why I'm showing you not only how to dye bath something today, but we're also going to do some hand paint. So let's move over there. Alright, now let's go on to hand painting. Hand painting can be done many ways. If you watch my videos, I always have the beginnings and the endings set. And there's many ways you can do this. You can dip dye, whatever, and then paint on top of it. But in hand painting, you add the Mortant or your acid directly into the dyes. So for today, I'm using 3. There's no rhyme or reason. I just add a little bit. You could also soak your wool into the acid Mortant, which is vinegar for this purpose. It just gets a little smelly around the house, and you think you're doing a little pickling. So, and this is where your OWG comes in handy, because you don't want to, I only have 3 bottles, so I don't want like 10 or 20 different colors mixed up. I've had that in the past and had to put a lid on them, but I just like everything cleaned up. And of course you want to make sure that the dye is actually, this is nice warm water with the dye and the vinegar. And if you watch my other videos, you could, about how to find your color repeat and how to find how it was dyed. We're just going to play with this. And this is why you want your ties loose, especially so you can make sure that you're getting ample enough coverage and move it around and see what you're dyeing. As you can tell, I got some bright blue. Those dyes are pretty wicked. That's why I said you should see my hands just by trying to get that in the pot. Fun times. And sometimes it may take a few bottles of one color over the next. until you get the right coverage. Again, you have to know your color wheel and what's going to be complementary or what you have in mind. And then of course get out your notebook and pencil or pen and say, okay, I made like a 3.5 inch, which, you know, 4 inch. And then I came over here and did another color, and what I did, and you can see that, you know, you get pretty sopping wet, even though I had these wrung out pretty good from being soaked. And as you can see, I'm not afraid to move them around. And you shouldn't be either. All right, time to mix up more dyes. Make green. I put green down the center, ended up with a blue. Blue and red make purple, so it's a complementary color going again against the color wheel, you know, what is complementary and not. And now I'm just going to add a lighter purple into here. And see how that's going to change the blue? And that's why we wouldn't want the green right up against the purple, because it will be icky looking. Unless you control it. That's why with hand painting, trying to use complementary, so that way here you don't make mud. Different variances adds character. All right, now this one's off to get ready to get steamed, set in, because I hand painted it on. Now as for the pot that we saw earlier, let me grab that. It's been cooling and my water is clear. You see that? Water is clear. So now this is ready to get either hand painted because it's already in a Mortant and the acid's already in there. But like I said, that's for another episode. And we'll see what I hand paint on top of this. Alright guys, there you have it. I hope you have a better understanding of when to add your Mortant or your acid to your dyes. It all depends on your application. As you saw, one was in the pot, a dye method, a dye bath, if you want to call it that, where it's all steam set in. And the other version being you hand paint it and then steam set it. Because the acid, like I said, you could soak all your yarns if you're all going to paint them, or you add them right directly to the dyes. So as always, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. I'll get to them as I can, and I do appreciate each and every comment. As always, please like, subscribe, hit the bell to be notified for when I post a new video, and next week we're going to be painting on top of that dye bath job that we did today. I'll see you in the next one. Peace!